Think different. Well, just to make things clear, this talk is not about the new iPhone. So why Apple then? Why the logo of a company that boasts an image of creativity and innovativeness? Because looking at it makes you, yes, all of you, more creative. Imagine I would have split the audience into two groups, and I'd say the left half of you had only seen the Apple logo, and the right half of you, the IBM logo. Now, if I were to test your creativity, the people on the left would, on average, perform better. Thirsty, clean, private. Forgetful, wise, bingo. Let's do the same game. Suppose the people on the left saw only the first column, and the people on the right, the other. Now, if I were to ask you to leave this building, the people on the right would need more time for this. Why? Because the right words are associated with elderliness, and reading them makes you behave a bit like an old person, which includes walking at a slower pace. These findings, which researchers have discovered in laboratory experiments, are a bit bewildering, but at the same time quite funny and cool. I mean, think about it. A brand can enhance our creative thinking, and reading certain words make us behave accordingly. Unfortunately, while some findings like these are amusing, others are rather worrisome. So is my next example. That's my favorite one, money. A £5 bill, nothing too spectacular. But what if I told you that right now, just because of looking at money for a few seconds, you have become more selfish than you usually are? Imagine I dropped a handful of paper sheets on the ground, and I'd say that you stood right next to me. Of course, you're a nice human being, and you would help me out to pick up some paper sheets. But you would help me less than you usually would, simply because of the fiver I've just shown to you. A part of selfishness, thinking about money makes us more self-reliant and gives us a greater preference for being alone. That's quite disturbing, isn't it? Let's go back to the Apple logo. Arguably, we all consider creativity something good, something we would all like to have a bit more of. But research has also shown that creative people are more dishonest, since it is easier for them to find excuses for their unethical behavior. Taking this finding at face value, my introduction did not only make you more creative, but it made it also easier for you to act immorally. Here at LSE, I want to contribute to this research on how our surroundings influence our behavior. The United States of America, the land of opportunity, or at least it used to be the land of opportunity before Trump. US culture is defined by the American dream, according to which every citizen can be successful if they work hard. For my dissertation, I want to investigate by the use of laboratory experiments where there is a dark side of the American dream that prompts people with a go-getter mentality to accept unwittingly more poverty within society. All the aforementioned findings are relatively new and part of an emerging field called behavioral science. I discovered my passion for this field about 4 years ago when I was reading books about how we humans make systematic errors in our thinking. And besides, I think it's pretty cool to be in a field that is on the verge of becoming mainstream. However, the flip side of being involved in an emerging science is that all findings have received rather scant interpretation. Let me give you an example of this. What makes us humans different from animals? Why exactly do we think we're special? This question has one obvious answer. Our species, as opposed to all others, enjoys the privilege of having freedom of thought. One may say that the possibility of making deliberate, proactive decisions that solely depend on our free will is what makes us special. However, all the findings I've just mentioned are at odds with this perception. Research has shown that mundane things like brand logos and money can influence our behavior. But every day, we absorb hundreds, if not thousands, of impressions that may affect our thinking. So where do we go from here? Does this mean that we're not accountable for our decisions because our thoughts, which prompt us to act the way we do, are shaped by whatever is around us? This can obviously not be the case. I've posed this rather philosophical, rhetoric question because this is, in fact, the impression I got as I became more knowledgeable about this field. When you try to get involved in behavioral science, you're basically inundated by all the ways your thinking could potentially be systematically wrong in a myriad of different cases. And this gives you, at first sight, the impression that you're influenced by everything, every time, and that your alleged free will succumbs to whatever is around you. While I'm not a soothsayer, I believe that behavioral science is going to become more and more popular in the foreseeable future. Some of you may have already heard of one or two of the findings I previously presented, but I'm convinced that every one of you will, sooner or later, learn more about this field. But I don't want you to get the same first impression I had from behavioral science. Realizing that things you can't control can shape your life is already a fairly scary thought. And not knowing to which extent this matters certainly won't help. For this reason, I would like to share with you, dear audience, 2 insights I've gained from behavioral science. To make them as memorable as possible, I've tried to put them into 2 short and sweet sentences. Insight number 1. Don't worry as long as your decision is not that important. What do I mean by this? Think about the decisions you take in your routine life. Where to go for lunch? Coffee or tea? At which pace should I exit the building? The lion's share of our decisions have virtually no long-term impact, which is why I think we shouldn't care too much about whether our surroundings have had an influence or not. Note that I'm not saying that we shouldn't care at all. We all have an innate streak of wariness when it comes to taking decisions. While this guard is certainly not impervious, I think it's good enough for daily life choices. Its imperfection, however, is the reason for insight number 2. If your decision matters, don't rush. What does looking at a brand logo, some words associated with old age, and money have in common? Their influence on our thoughts and our decisions is only transient, unlikely to go away after some time. Forcing yourself to take an important decision as soon as possible is therefore a very bad idea. Besides, there's some serious research on how sleeping on a decision problem can actually improve your decision-making ability. Now, these 2 insights are nothing mind-blowing. Sorry for that. And of course, besides these 2 extreme poles of unimportant and important things, there's much more to learn about how you can improve your decision-making based on behavioral science. But just try to follow these 2 rules and see how many people violate them. Some of my friends deliberate thoroughly where to go for lunch, and I know others who accepted their offer to study at a certain university, a decision that will affect your entire life immediately. Moreover, these 2 insights provide a crucial message. Today, we live in a world where everything seems to become more complex. More detailed information, more ambiguous choices, more potential mistakes, more of everything. In this world, it becomes more difficult to see the big picture and not getting lost in the details. It's fascinating that in a constantly evolving world, more complex decision-making doesn't seem to be a viable solution. However, a fairly simple approach may come in handy to stay afloat. Thank you.